Hello and welcome to PFF Fantasy Football Podcast Super Bowl edition. Hope you guys are all ready for the big game. I'm here to help preview things alongside my two favorite co-hosts, my only two co-hosts, Dwain "The Rock" McFarland and Andrew Erickson. Fellas, how's it going? Andrew, you can say something first.
Things are going good. Yeah, I'm excited to break down the Super Bowl. I know that people have heard about, the Bengals offensive line versus Rams defensive front, like what's going to happen, but happy to talk about some of these favorite player props that I've been hitting basically for the past 2 weeks. Talk a little DFS, and yeah, get ready for the hashtag big game.
Prop prophet himself. This is his Super Bowl, pun intended. Dwain, how are you, my friend?
Man, I am excellent. It's a Super Bowl. Like, what? I mean, what else do we want? Like,
what else do we
get to do a job where I talk about the NFL for my living. Get paid to do it. I guess in most jobs you get paid. Maybe there's some where you don't. But I don't have to be like an intern doing it. You know what I mean?
Dwayne's trying to spark a should you be paid to work argument here.
No, not yet. We'll save that for deeper.
You guys are getting paid? What?
All right, so today I understand everyone, we're recording this on a Friday. I'm sure you've all had plenty of time to think about the Super Bowl, so we're not trying to go through each and every matchup out there, but we do want to go through a key thing for each offense to look out for, our favorite props, picks for the game, and some quick DFS thoughts. So fellas, let's get started with Joe Burrow and this Bengals offense. Obviously, we're going to need to see Chase and Ramsey. Who's going to win that battle? Can Joe Mixon get past Aaron Donald and company? Andrew, what is the one matchup that you're kind of most interested in or have a big time take on concerning the Bengals offense?
Yeah, I think that something I'm really looking forward to watching is, how the Bengals take advantage of T. Higgins when he's matched up against Darius Williams. Like, I think that that's a huge mismatch. I know that there's been a lot of talk about Ramsey, lining up against Jamar Chase, and that's obviously like the battle of the two alphas, but really it comes down to, not to call T. Higgins an ancillary receiver, but he is kind of the 1B in the Bengals offense. But I mean, when you look at the just size mismatch of Higgins versus Williams, I mean, Darius Williams, 5'9", 187. I mean, that I was close to that type of weight in my prime. Like, I was right around there. So, and then T. Higgins, you have coming at 6'4", 215 pounds. I just think that there's a huge mismatch for T. Higgins and the advantage that he has over Darius Williams just to absolutely body him. Higgins has a 26% target share over the last 2 weeks, which is higher than Jamar Chase. And Williams has been targeted 18 times over the last 2 weeks. Like, it's no debate who teams are picking on. They're not looking to find Ramsey on an island and pick on him. They're trying to find Darius Williams because he's definitely the weakest part of the Rams secondary. So I think Higgins is really in store for a massive game if we do end up seeing a lot of coverage Ramsey on Jamar Chase.
Dwayne, are you in similar feelings? I mean, this was kind of what Ben Brown was saying on our 10 Questions podcast as well. It seems like, come on, we got Ramsey, most likely spending most of his time across from Chase. Is it Higgins that needs to be the X factor here? Or are you looking elsewhere?
Well, the only problem, right, is when we talk about the Rams, really, over 70% of the time they're playing zone. So unless they're running a match concept, even when you have Ramsey lined up over you, like, is he following you for the whole route? I think that's the question. We have seen that some this year, but just because he shadows doesn't mean that he always stays with the player through the whole route. So it's a little bit confusing, but I do agree overall with what Andrew's saying. And I think the biggest thing for me is we know that the Bengals are probably going to have to try to use the quick passing game. And if you guys haven't checked out Seth Galina's article about one of the best ways that the Bengals can be successful with the quick passing game because of the way that the Rams come out on early downs. Like, so as long as we don't have the Bengals trying to just run the ball into the five-man front, so when I say five-man front, the five down defensive linemen that the Rams quite often use on first down, that means you got less guys in coverage back behind it. So if you get Cincinnati trying to use more of that quick passing like what we saw against Kansas City, is this potentially a game where we see Tyler Boyd, have a nice game? Because we've got C.J. Uzomah, did get a limited practice yesterday. I haven't seen, you may have it, Ian, but I haven't seen what he did today. So I kind of think Tyler Boyd, is a sneaky matchup, guy, because he's got the lowest ADOT on the team. He's going to work from the slot. So he could end up this could be Tyler Boyd's most important game of the season. T. Higgins was the guy I was going to talk about, first, but I think you just put Tyler Boyd in that same conversation.
99 targets this season without a single drop for Tyler Boyd. League high, next closest guy, Cordero Patterson, 63. He's second place. It would be I'd be a bad analyst if I didn't bring it up. All CPAT allegiance aside, so I don't want to hear any of that. I think Ramsey can, at a minimum, not let Chase take over the entire freaking game, which is going to lead to all these complimentary pieces. And don't sleep on Uzomah. He did say he will be out there. I'm not missing the biggest game of my life. Whether he's listed questionable or not, remains to be seen. But this Rams defense, man, again, we see them really great against wide receivers as a whole. Darius Williams excluded and all that, but versus inline receivers, 25th in yards per attempt allowed, versus receivers out of the backfield, 21st. Dwayne, we kind of mocked it all year long. Like, why Samaje Perine? Why was he the one getting the pass down role in Cincinnati? I was making fun of him last week in front of my friends, and then he immediately takes a screen to the house, and I look like a freaking idiot, despite this is my profession. But it's weird, man, because Mixon, they really switch roles from what they were doing at Oklahoma. I'm curious to see here, because this is, last game of the year, can't hold anything back. Dwayne, do you think we see the usual Mixon Perine usage still, or could it be a situation where it's like, hey, Joe, unless your freaking leg falls off, you're not leaving the field?
I have a feeling it's going to be the same. They just seem to prefer, Perine. The way I look at it, like every game, once you get into, and really, if you look at the Bengals, they didn't play the last week. So let's just look at the playoffs. Like, if you just look at the playoffs, like those are all do or die basically games, right? It's like, hey, we've got to win to keep going. And in every game, really, Perine's owned all of the long down and distance work, most of the 2-minute offense work. So I really don't think that's going to change. And if the Bengals come out and force themselves into more long down and distance, which could happen with a really good Rams defensive front, right? Whether it's a sack or whether it's a stuff on first down of Joe Mixon, we could see more long down and distance situations in the game, which means Perine could be on the field just a little bit more than what we've seen in the past. Everything's situational. Depends on the way the game script works out. But if we find the Bengals in those sort of situations, like this could be a game where Perine actually has more work than he's had in the previous 3.
21%, 22%, 25% snap rates over the past 3 weeks for Perine. With that said, before last week, and this is coming from Andrew Erickson's always fantastic prop article on PFF.com, he had only surpassed 13 receiving yards just once since week 12. We will see what happens ahead of Sunday. Fellas, now let's talk about Matthew Stafford and this Rams offense. Andrew, what sticks out to you here? Because on the one hand, we know what Cooper Kupp's capable of. We've seen OBJ catch 18 of 21 targets and be great. With that said, is the Cam Akers maybe not, I don't want to say hate, but the Rams running game, like, okay, they haven't gotten anything going over the past 3-4 weeks. With that said, they face quite a few juggernaut front sevens. Not so sure the Cincy one is, with all due respect to Trey Hendrickson and Sam Hubbard.
Yeah, it's tough because I'm really torn here because I've just been betting Cam Akers unders all week long. so I want to come out and say, nah, dude, he's got no chance of doing absolutely nothing. But you bring up a really good point. Like, they have faced, the juggernaut of run defenses. The 49ers are a top run defense. The Buccaneers are a top run defense. And the Rams, have just been deciding to run into these walls and to no avail. And, Akers' numbers have obviously not looked good from an efficiency standpoint. It's pretty well known that just hasn't really been super efficient on the ground, but it has been a lot of tough matchups, and he hasn't been put in a position where he's able to succeed. Same thing with Sony Michel. I don't think he got over 20 yards in the last game that he played, despite having a decent amount of volume. But I do think that Akers still has the main role as the receiver out of the backfield. Even when he first came back, he was still playing over Sony Michel in terms of routes run on receiving down. So if there's a scenario in this game where the Rams do fall behind, then you look at Cam Akers. I like a lot of Cam Akers overs on some of his receiving yards props, because I think that's his role, even though we've gotten coach speak from Sean McVay saying that, okay, we're going to ride the hot hand, depends on how the game flows, which makes exact sense. Like, if they're up big, they might use Sony Michel a little bit more in that more of that power run scheme, as opposed to using Cam Akers, where if it's a little bit more back and forth, we'll probably see more Cam Akers in there. And I know that Darrell Henderson now is being rumored to be part of the mix as well, but I really don't think he's going to have much of a role. I think he'll be active, and if something gets, Cam Akers hurt his shoulder last week, so of course you want to have a, Darrell Henderson available to you and not Jake Funk as your third down back. You'd prefer Henderson, who's actually been a starting running back in the NFL this season. So I do think that Cam Akers is probably being a little underrated from an efficiency standpoint, because I think that the Bengals' run defense is not nearly as good as the defenses that they've played, but I do have concerns about the volume that he'll see. I do think that it will be not necessarily so skewed, like a couple weeks ago when we saw Akers basically out-touch Michel. I think it was 27-3, like the last time that we saw them both fully held. I think that's a little too aggressive, but I do think that Akers ultimately does rule the backfield.
Yeah, the Akers, I want to see kind of like where his dynasty ADP and like ranks have moved over the past 5-6 weeks because, after he just completely dominated the backfield, it was like, we're back. We're good. RB1 all over again. And then all of a sudden last week, he's back to splitting things with Sony Michel. As it stands, polished off the first edition of my dynasty ranks the other night. I got Cam Akers, RB14, just a little bit below the industry consensus. Dwayne, how is your opinion on Akers, from a fantasy dynasty standpoint, really changed throughout these playoffs? Obviously, it's been great seeing him get back to full health, but man, we've seen enough here with Sony staying involved. I'm not super convinced he's going to be out there getting that, 300-400 touch role that maybe we thought he would based on the first few games where he was a lead back.
I think no one knows anything. That's what I think.
Okay, there we go.
I hate to say that, but dude, think about like last week. We're like, oh my God, Cam Akers, 80%, 2 weeks ago, right? And now it's, he was out there for 40% of the snaps. It's kind of all over the place. One week we think, wow, it's hard to think that Cam Akers can't be a top 10 back. And then, we get one new data point. And it's like, wow, maybe Cam Akers isn't inside the top 12. I think we're going to have to wait and see how the offseason plays out. What does that look like? Do they bring Sony Michel back? Is it just Darrell Henderson, with Akers to start the season next year? Do they draft someone? I think there's a lot of different things that could happen. I think the positive for Akers is we have seen him, come back and handle, a really all things, considered, like this is a really big workload to be handling, when you just suffered an Achilles tear, this past summer. So I think those things are all positive, but we also haven't seen him be very efficient, right? He just hasn't been able to do much with the work. Now, part of that could be related to coming back early, from an injury. So with me, it's just hard for me to put like a real firm stake in the ground right now on Cam Akers, but like I have him borderline in my top 12 right now.
Okay. Great minds, as they say. So we talked about kind of Chase and going against Ramsey and maybe having those issues and forcing Higgins and Boyd to become a bigger part of the offense. I'm not so sure it's going to be the case on the other side of the ball because there's only one Jalen Ramsey in this NFL league that we like to follow, and he does not play for the Cincinnati Bengals. Shout out to Chidobe Awuzie, PFF's 20th highest graded cornerback among 133 qualified guys. And even Mike Hilton in the slot, he's 23rd. We all saw that great interception he had against Ryan Tannehill a few rounds ago. But Eli Apple, despite all of his greatness on social media over the past few weeks, just tied for 74th on the year. And it really hasn't been all that great in the playoffs. He's made a couple big plays. I mean, if you look at it, he did get the interception last week. He also got his hand in there on the Ryan Tannehill game-ending interception. But overall, 14 of 20 targets into his coverage have been caught for 155 yards and a pair of scores this postseason. So they have used these guys to shadow at times Chidobe and Eli. They did it on A.J. Brown and Julio Jones a couple rounds ago. With that said, neither guy have made any sort of a habit staying in the slot. I mean, Awuzie just 5.5% of his snaps all year in the slot. Eli even lower at 4.7%. So with all due respect to Mike Hilton, with all due respect to every corner in the National Football League, I don't think any of them can exactly match Cooper Kupp. And that's why as we start to transition a little bit to the props, if you guys did miss the 10 questions edition I did with Ben Brown, Cooper Kupp over 8.5 receptions at plus 106 is a line that PFF is supporting because, my God, guys, the volume's there, the matchup's there. It's Cooper freaking Kupp. 8.5 receptions is one of the most absurd lines ever. But you know what? Cooper Kupp just had one of the most absurd seasons ever. So maybe it's about time we start getting behind it. Dwayne, does that sound too ridiculous for you? Or like, I don't know, man. Like how many times, what did it take us? 3-4 weeks during the regular season to kind of get behind Kupp as like, okay, this guy's a legit top 5 fantasy receiver now. Let's go. It's a Super Bowl. Can't hold anything back.
Yeah, I mean, I don't see how you go against Cooper Kupp. He's been pretty much automatic this season and hitting the over. You're right. It's weird seeing a reception total like that and thinking, oh, I'm going to bet the over. And it's just easy to click the over just because that's not typical for every other receiver. So yeah, I think Cooper Kupp, is the easy option. Another name that I would throw out there would be Odell Beckham Jr. I mean, just if we have Tyler Higbee not playing, we don't know yet. He was a DNP yesterday. We'll have to see what the practice report says today on Higbee. But with Beckham, I mean, he's just picked up more steam here over the last few weeks. And so, you're going to need a secondary weapon to really get involved. The Rams don't use the backs a ton. out of the backfield. So if Higbee is out, and we know Jefferson's really still more the deep threat, Beckham's the other guy that works all areas of the field. So if you guys check out, over on PFF, I think that's actually, let me pull up. Yeah, that's who Nathan Yonke actually had at his top guy that he liked for the week outside of Kupp was Odell Beckham Jr. And I agree with that. He has some really great analysis on it. But, one of the things we talk about a lot on here is, the type of defense you're playing. And remember, this is whenever you look at, the Bengals, they're going to run more man defense, than what we've really seen the Rams face over the last few weeks, where they face really heavy zone opponents. Like the Bengals are not like a Superman heavy D, but they're going to run more man defense than what the Rams have been used to seeing. And in those cases, when you look at Beckham, targets per route run is 30% versus zone, it's only 16%.
Yeah, and you look at what Stafford has dominated this year, and that has been man coverage, 94.1 PFF passing grade against cover one. I mean, Burrow basically owns him and everything else, but maybe, just maybe, he can get those one-on-one matchups with Kupp and OBJ. I also read a great article, shout out to Benjamin Solak and Steven Ruiz over at The Ringer, where they were kind of going through the different game plan, just how they're expecting basically both offenses to attack the defense. And, I think the point that I want to say Solak was making was that with OBJ now, he even gives them something that they didn't have with Robert Woods, being that you can isolate him away from trips and force defenses to maybe have to put a second defender over there. So when you really can't tilt your coverage towards Cooper freaking Kupp, that is when you're going to have problems. So, Andrew, we buried the lead. I always do this, but you're the prop prophet, man. So now it is your time to shine. What are your best props, favorite props for the Super Bowl of props? And just also, the Super Bowl.
All right. I love the introduction there. So let's go start with the quarterbacks. We're doing rushing for the quarterbacks. We're not touching those passing yard props. The lines are too efficient now at this point. So Joe Burrow under 8.5 for his longest rushing attempt. So if you look at Burrow this season, so he's rushed 14 times for 38 yards in his last 4 games, for an average of 9.5 rushing yards per game. And only one of those rushing attempts did he get at least 9 yards. So if you look at his carries on the year as a total, so 49 total carries, he has gone over 8.5 rushing yards on one of those runs in the last 4 weeks and just thrice this season. So only 3 times he's hit it. So if you can get it, I think it's a really easy one to go under on. I think that just his rushing is being a little overinflated from last week where he was running around a little bit more. People are seeing him scrambling, but he's someone that's going to slide. Like he's not going to try to churn out extra yards. He's going to go as far as he needs to get the first down, and then he's going to go down. So I think that under 8.5 for the longest run is really easy.
Have our PFF player prop tool up on the screen for you YouTubers out there. And while we do recommend Burrow over 12.5 rushing yards, to Andrew's point, we're just looking at the longest rush in the picture. I don't think our algorithm here is going that deep into those props, but I'm happy you were able to find out some of those in-depth stats for us, Andrew. Dwain, have you dove into the prop market a ton ahead of Sunday?
I've divin into a few things, Ian, but not as deep as what Andrew just doled out there for everybody. I don't have a thrice that I can work into my statement either. I wish I did, but I don't. So yeah, I would just say kind of going back to Samaje Perine would be the guy for me. And I know if you go to our best bets tool, Ian, and you just sort it by edge, I believe it pops up as one of the top bets. But there's a lot going into that. One, we know that the Rams play so much zone, so we know that what happens in those cases, you throw the ball more to your backs. We know that the Rams have an advantage in the pass rush, so we could see the Bengals have more long down and distance. That also means you get to have Perine on the field more. So when you combine those two things together, potentially more work for Perine against a defense that's going to be easy for Burrow to get the ball out. And we also talked about to help beat the blitz, what do? You use more of the quick passing game. So there could be some situations where you get Perine a little bit more involved there. Like you mentioned, we saw a little bit of Perine, it wasn't like he came, he did all this stuff on his own. It was a play that worked out really good, right? That he scored on, and had the long reception. But with Perine, he's a guy that it's one of those situations where all the signs point to, okay, like he can hit the over, on what we have, which I think is at 14.5 still on the rush receiving yards.
The 4 bets that our betting tool deems to have an edge of 25% or more: Cooper Kupp over 0.5 rushing yards. That's interesting. Cooper Kupp over 8.5 receptions, which we brought up. Samaje Perine over 14.5 combined rushing and receiving yards. And Matthew Stafford over 6.5 rushing or receiving yards. So keep an eye on those. Again, just quickly to rehash the ones that Ben Brown was kind enough to give us. For those that don't know, Ben Brown hosts the PFF Gambling Podcast. Samaje Perine over 5.5 rushing yards. Might even be able to get that line a little bit lower. Total punts over 6.5. Guys, this is how I can start to be accepted again by the kicker community. Not that I want to be or have any sort of desire to be, but gambling on the events and outcomes of kicking events. That sounds like a good time, which is why we will also be betting first kickoff touchback. Yes, fading this idea that the first Super Bowl, have you guys heard about this? The first ball they kick in the Super Bowl, apparently per Pat McAfee, is immediately sent to Canton, so they don't get a chance to actually break it in as well as usual. So that's why maybe these odds aren't quite as high as usual on the kickoff touchbacks, but we are rolling with yes anyway. Cooper Kupp over 8.5, and Matthew Stafford under 0.5 interceptions if you really hate yourself. First touchdown score will be a passing touchdown, and the team that scores first will win. Yes, at -160. Guys, I also want to point out that we need to bet the under on the national anthem. Let's not forget about this. Mickey Guyton singing this. Literally in an interview, the person singing the national anthem said, "I guess they call me Quickie Mickey because I do sing the national anthem fast." 21 minutes into this podcast, but that's the biggest takeaway here, right? Quickie Mickey.
That's a terrible nickname.
She gave it to herself.
I hope he doesn't tell girls that's his nickname.
I think it is a girl.
Well, tell girls and guys.
Yeah, it is a girl.
teach their own.
Oh, Andrew. All right, guys. Do any of those stick out other than the national anthem one? Because that's just free money.
The ones you listed?
Yeah. Here we go. I got them up on the screen.
No, the main ones I really look at are the player props. I don't pay attention to the first kickoff.
You guys
touchback.
are so lame.
I read them, but I don't have any thought about how I get an advantage on that. I haven't thought through any of that or read any material that would tell me that. I guess I could probably quickly Google and there'd be something out there telling me why I should, bet one way or another.
All right, before we get our pick for the game, just want to quickly update everyone on the injuries. Rams are looking pretty good overall. The only major question is going to be Tyler Higbee. Andrew, we got our cheap tight end. If Higbee's not in there, I know you're excited about that. DFS thoughts in a minute, but keep an eye on Higbee. We mentioned the Cam Akers shoulder problem, but he was able to practice in a full fashion on Thursday. With the Bengals, 5 players listed as questionable: edge Cam Sample, tight end CJ Uzomah, defensive tackle Josh Tupou, wide receiver Stanley Morgan, and guard Jackson Carman. Only one to really kind of monitor is Uzomah, but again, he did say he is expecting to be out there and will apparently be bathing in Skyline Chili if the Bengals happen to take home the W. So shout out to CJ Uzomah for going out on a limb there. Fellas, takes us to the picks. This is your moment. I want you guys to give an exact score prediction. If you're wrong, we'll probably never bring it up again. If you happen to nail it, maybe you'll, get some social media love. I don't know, but it's an exciting time. Andrew, what's your score prediction?
Going my LA Rams.
The hat.
24-20 Rams.
Rams 24-20 from Andrew. Dwain, what do you got?
I have Rams as well, 27-20.
Do you guys talk before this? What the hell is going on? Because
I honestly, I just feel like the Rams are a really tough matchup for the Bengals.
The Rams are better than the Bengals in every way. When you look at it from just a mathematics.
Besides Burrow, yeah.
Yeah, that's it. And then that's why they have a chance, because of the quarterback. But besides that, the Rams are better in almost, I think, in every other way they have the edge.
That's why I got Rams 31-13. I'm not going. Yeah, come on, guys, trying to do this. Oh, Rams win, but Bengals cover. Softest thing
I
I've
was the
ever
only
seen.
one that did that, but
I've got, yeah.
Depends on what the line was at. I mean, what's it at? 4.5.
Reasonable.
What is it now? 4.5, or is it still at 4?
It's
probably
4,
climbing even more
It's at
as the
6
podcast
now.
gets recorded. Andrew 24-20 Rams, Dwayne 27-20 Rams, Ian 31-13 Rams. If you're Bengals fans out there, you should be hyped right now. This is like that graphic we see on the pregame shows where everyone's picking the wrong team here. Yes, so good stuff there. Andrew, before we get out of here, you did your weekly DFS breakdown, which you can always find on PFF.com. As I pull it up online, what were kind of your big takeaways on? It's like, what's your general goals? Because showdown slates are something that we usually didn't make a habit of talking too much about, during our weekly DFS shows throughout the year. They are quite a bit different, though. I would just say, before I throw it over to you, the one thing to keep in mind with the showdown slates, don't be afraid to leave salary there, because there's such a heightened chance to have, duplicate lineups that a big way to be contrarian is to simply, leave $1,000, leave $800 on the table. So, Andrew, salary sticks aside, what are you thinking here ahead of Super Bowl DFS Showdown?
Yeah, I think that obviously, making sure you have a unique lineup is definitely key, like you would hit on, and also be cognizant of what contest you're playing in. Like, I've been playing a lot more small field GPPs where you have to buy a little more of an entry, and the prize pool isn't necessarily as big, but I'm only going up against, 300 people or 400 people as opposed to 800,000 people. like that's and that's what you need to know, that because if you are only facing 300 other people, then you don't need to be like super galaxy brain. Like, I gotta make sure that there's so much salary left over. I need to make sure that it's so unique in so many different ways. Like, you don't need that, because not every lineup is going to be played. But in the millionaire maker contest on DraftKings, like, every single lineup you could possibly think of is going to be in play. So unless you want to split the winnings with a bunch of other people, especially if it's a very chalky lineup, that's just not going to work. So I think that a good way to do it is to build a lineup, like a quote unquote chalky lineup, and then see, okay, how can I get different here? Okay, I build a lineup I really like with Cam Akers in it, and I just take Cam Akers out, I just put in Sony Michel. That's all you do differently, because most people would make that lineup, they'll probably just put in Cam Akers because, I have the money to pay for him. I'll just pay for the quote unquote, Rams starting running back, when it's pretty easy to envision a scenario where Michel, scores the touchdowns, Akers gets hurt or something like that happens. And especially on this slate, too, it's interesting because we have two teams that don't really use a lot of their ancillary pieces. Like, each team has their top 3 receivers. They have one tight end that plays on every single down. And then they each have – and running back is really the only area where they do kind of split it a little bit. But we still really have Mixon as the main guy and Akers as the main guy. So I think that running back is interesting as a point to try to get some – under or value plays like a Samaje Perine, like Dwain mentioned, or Sony Michel, who I kind of like a lot. Hey, Sony Michel was the guy that put the Rams to defeat the last time they played in the Super Bowl. He's got Super Bowl experience, and we'll see. Maybe he plays hot, and they decide to ride Sony Michel. What was thought about this Super Bowl last year is all the guys that scored touchdowns were all the guys that the Buccaneers acquired and got in trades. Yeah. So if you look at the Rams, could it be Stafford throwing it to OBJ, throwing it to Sony Michel? All the guys that they were able to kind of pick up throughout the season are the guys that ultimately kind of get them to the victory, as opposed to guys that had coming back from last year. So those are just kind of some overarching thoughts on the slate. I think that from a player perspective, I think that Van Jefferson is really interesting as a cheaper wide receiver. He's been pretty bad for the last couple of weeks, but when I look at him versus a Tyler Boyd, I think Boyd probably has a pretty safer projection. But when I look at Van Jefferson, the guy has been a high value target machine over the last couple weeks. He had 120 air yards last week, did absolutely nothing with them, but that's something we chase. We chase the air yards every single week, and he's a big play threat. His average depth of target is number 1 on the Rams. They're not using OBJ as much downfield as much as they're using him as more of a move the chains and possession wide receiver. So if you need someone to score a big play, it's probably going to be Van Jefferson. He had 3 deep targets last week. He had 1 in the end zone, and that was coming off the prior week where he also saw another deep target and another target in the end zone. So if Van Jefferson catches the pass, it's either going to be for 20 yards plus or a touchdown. But it's just he only may catch 1 or 2 balls. That's the thing with Van Jefferson. So I think that he's interesting as one of the cheaper wide receivers. I think that he'll probably be the least popular of the 3 starting receivers on both teams, or at least it'll be pretty close between him and a Tyler Boyd. I think that Bengals in the captain spot is pretty contrarian, whether it be a T. Higgins or a Joe Mixon, especially if you don't play Joe Burrow. I think that those are probably some things that I like. I particularly like T. Higgins in the captain spot, and Kupp not in the captain spot, just playing Kupp in the flex. I know Kevin Cole's done a lot of research on flex, leverage as a or wide receiver leverage in the flex as opposed to the captain spot. I think playing Kupp in captain spot is probably going to be the most popular move that a lot of people make, which, I mean, I can't necessarily say that I blame people for doing that because he's going to score the most points probably, but if you're able to finagle a better lineup with Kupp in the flex, I think that makes a ton of sense. I hit on Michelle, and I think that if you're playing in a very big field, you need to do a unique build where it's like a 5-1 or 4-2 on the side of the Bengals. So, and the way I think if I was playing in a large field GPP, I would play Kupp into the captain spot, and I would play all Bengals. Like that's what I would do, and that's worked for me. The one time I've won a showdown contest, I remember I played Darren Waller in the captain spot, and I played all Chargers, and it worked. So I think that's an interesting strategy because it's a really way to envision a scenario where it's just Kupp, doing all the production for the Rams like he does in most games, and then you're just hoping that the Bengals are just playing catch up and Burrow's throwing the ball 40 times and Chase scores and Higgins scores and all these guys end up scoring, and it's not just one guy that's centered around. So that would be my contrarian way to attack it, but in most cases I'll probably build around the Rams in some of these smaller field GPPs with Kupp and Matthew Stafford as my preferred pairing, and then kind of trickling in some Bengals guys, but really focusing on those players.
You mentioned Sony as kind of a, backup, a little bit contrarian play. I think, we've said Perine could have enhanced opportunities as well. Dwain, is there someone out of these, complimentary wide receivers, our Bennett Skoroneks of the world, our, Trent Taylors, who's not actually, registering snaps aside from on 2-point conversions that should have been going to Auden Tate if he was healthy enough to suit up. We got Drew Sample potentially if CJ Uzoma winds up, not being a man of his word. Hell, we could have Kendall Blanton out there playing a full-time role if Tyler Higbee doesn't end up suiting up. Big name guys aside, you take away every team's top 3 pass game options. Who do you like to maybe surprise some people this week, Dwayne?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's the backup tight ends. It's 2 guys you gave, because really these 2 teams, they don't really use other receivers outside. They run a lot of 11 personnel, but they don't rotate. The other guys
at all.
It really, yeah. Well, when you have the 3 that each of these teams have, and I know Van Jefferson hasn't been great, but to Andrew's point, he's playing a very specific role on his team. Stretching the field out. They like going with the guys that they have. We did have a brief moment, where we saw Bennett Skowronek handle a little bit more, but that's long gone. It's been all back to Van Jefferson. So no, there's nobody sneaky. I think the only way to do it is really with the secondary backs you talked about, or the backup tight ends.
I remember the first Super Bowl I really played a bunch of DFS was Eagles, Patriots, and I was lucky enough to hit on Corey Clement. I've been looking for the Corey Clement ever since, but I'm starting to think there isn't the number 3 running back that goes for 100 receiving yards, every single Super Bowl. So just, thing I've learned over the years. Good stuff. Fellas, before we get out of here, I just want to point out to everyone that you can get some skin in the game by going to DraftKings. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app. Use promo code PFF and get 56-1 odds on either team. Bet just $5 and get $280 in free bets if your team wins. That's promo code PFF at DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sports betting partner of Super Bowl 56. Just know it must be 21 years or older. See DraftKings.com/sportsbook for a full list of requirements and state-specific gambling responsible resources. And if you have a gambling problem, call 1-800-GAMBLER. Also want to note that until February 14th, you can get 25% off any PFF subscription if you use code SUPER25, support the podcast, use promo code SUPER25 for 25% off any sub. Get all that locked article content, rankings, green line, player prop tool, our NFL draft guide, and so much more. Again, that's promo code SUPER25 for 25% off any sub. And finally, with Manscaped, special Valentine's Day offer this V-Day. It's time to join the 4 million men worldwide who trust Manscaped, the leaders in below-the-waist grooming with our exclusive offer. Go to Manscaped and use code PFF for 20% off and free shipping. That's 20% off with free shipping at manscaped.com and use code PFF. Join Cupid and shoot your arrow with Manscaped this Valentine's Day. Fellas, we have concluded this podcast, but it is a slightly somber day. Andrew, the floor is yours.
Yeah, so I regret to inform everybody that this is going to be my last podcast with PFF. I have a new opportunity that has come to me in my life, so I will be taking my talents elsewhere. It's the best way I can put it, but it's been awesome these past 2 years at PFF, working full time with Ian, and this past year with Dwain. It's just been an absolute pleasure. These 2 dudes are just absolute grinders. Made me so much better of an analyst since when I started back in 2 seasons ago at the beginning. I thought I was hot shit, right? I was came in like, oh, there we go, this will be easy, but these guys have such strong skill sets in different ways, and there's really no one way to be a good fantasy analyst. There's a lot of ways to do it, and I think that, learning under these guys and watching these guys work has really helped me improve significantly. So can't thank you guys enough for helping me being on this platform. Ian, you could be like, Andrew, you're not coming on. Like, you suck, man. Like, you're not coming on the podcast.
Stop it. You don't build it, man. Episode 426, and, I think you probably hit triple digits on your own. So, didn't mean to cut you off, but come on, man. You helped get us here. And, again, I know I speak for Dwain as well, where we're incredibly happy for you. And, it sucks to see you go, but you've done so many good things. Whoever is out there getting you, they are getting a good one. Dwain, any final comments?
Yeah.
Like, if you really hate Andrew, like, now would be kind of a funny time to bring it up.
This is probably a good time to let me know.
Yeah, I've been waiting all season to do this. No, man, dude, you do a great job. And like just how much like you've grown even just this year, like how good you've become at prop bets. I think your DFS content is way up there. I think you do a great job. And I think you're constantly, you talk about me and Ian being grinders, but man, like, I get very specialized in certain things that I'm looking at and I go really deep into them. Like, and so I have certain niches like where I'm super strong, but like, man, your breadth of all the things that you can hit, like I'm always impressed. I'm always like, man, like Andrew's really like, he's got the full scope of everything going on. So I think it's nothing but, I think your future, like it's all bright, man. Like you're going to get to do whatever you want to do in this industry. And man, we'll be happy to have you back on anytime we can get you on.
The bar I've always tried to hold kind of for myself is like if there's someone out there that really likes my content, believes in me as a fantasy analyst, I would hope that, through everything I do, they could have, DFS season-long Dynasty. All their fantasy questions, like I want to hopefully be there to answer them. I understand there's other great content providers, but I think part of our goal, if we want to be one of the most complete analysts, is to basically hit on all the content out there that people will be interested in. And Andrew, you do that, man. It's great. And then it's DFS Dynasty season long. Anyone that actually does go through the prop best ball, like anyone that really does try to dive into all these different things, knows how difficult they can be. They're completely different games in and of themselves. So applaud you for not only, stepping up the plate and doing it, but doing it well. It's really easy to go out there and say, hey, everyone, here are my top 10 picks this week. We'll see how many are right. And even when 8 are wrong, we'll be right back next week with 10 new picks. A lot harder to actually go through, team by team and again, game by game.
Yeah, and you get skin in the game. I think that's very important to me. I do not listen to any analyst. No offense, there's probably some good ones. I'll listen to content creators, like because I think there's and they go hand in hand. But I think you do a really good job of creating good content, but you also have skin in the game. Like I know you actually care about what you're writing because you're putting money on it. Like you're putting your dollars out there. So I respect that greatly because those are the type of analysts I mostly want to go to. The folks that I know that are not only just writing the stuff, and we had a lot of them in the fantasy industry this year do really well. I wish I would have been one of the people that won like $1 million, but it wasn't me. We'll keep working on it, Andrew.
Next year.
I know you put your skin in the game on it, and that means a lot to me.
Thanks, guys.
This will not be your last episode, Andrew. I'll drag your ass back here for some more cheap.
We got to get someone back on to talk about Deontay Harris and his breakdown next year.
Exactly. I'll cover for you on Deontay Harris for until you can get back on for an episode.
Well, from Dwain, myself, and all the listeners out there, we sincerely thank you, Andrew, and wish you the best of luck in the future. Hope everyone has a great Super Bowl 56. We will be back next week, full send Dynasty mode at that point. Hope you guys have enjoyed the content, that we've been sprinkling up to this point. But truly, once Tuesday hits, people, we are going all in Dynasty streets. I finished my rankings yesterday. I'm hyped. I'm ready to bark about it. So for Andrew, for Dwain, I'm Ian. Thanks as always for tuning in to PFF Fantasy Football Podcast. And until next time, take care, everybody.